Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session from ERE-to-VE, a three-step strategy for winning SSD cases at hearing. This is part of Chronicle's Advancing Technology in Disability Law series, where we bring together the tools and workflows that are helping disability firms do sharper, faster hearing prep. You will get a full replay from today's session in your inbox after this session. So there's no need to take detailed notes or anything like that. We'll actually have a summary doc that you'll be able to download as quickly as after this workshop if you submit the feedback form. And so if you have any notes along the way, you're welcome to take them, but just be aware that we help you out on that side as well. The other side of things here is that if you have any questions along the way, you're welcome to ask them in the chat. The only thing we ask is that if you can drop two hashtags in front of your question, it makes it easy for our teams to just follow along with your question and make sure that we answer it over the course of today's workshop. And with that, we're going to go over a quick roadmap of what you're going to leave today's session on before I do a quick introduction to the speakers, and then we're going to explore this core workflow. So by the end of today's session, what you're going to learn is how Chronicle turns ERE files into a complete organized case record so that nothing's missing and it's always current, how Superinsight synthesizes these records into a full RFC with source citations, and also how Workscape Analytics turns that RFC then into vocational strategy for the VE table. And what's really cool about this is you're going to see by the end of it, this entire workflow live across the three platforms. So you can see how all the platforms communicate with one another. With that, I wanted to do a quick roadmap of where we're going here. We're going to frame up the problem and explain why the ERE-to-VE prep workflow breaks down for most disability firms. From there, we'll pass it over to Nikhil from Chronicle to share more about ERE monitoring in action. From there, Nikhil will pass it over to Luke, who's from Superinsight, who's going to talk about RFC extraction and AI chronologies that turn records into hearing prep. We'll then pass it over to Kristen from Workscape to talk about occupational data and VE cross-examination strategies. And then we're going to do a recap of what we go over with those three platforms to then talk about the full stack. And then we're going to share some more information in terms of a special offer for folks today, as well as any questions that folks have along the way. With that, as I mentioned, you're going to want to stay until the end because we will have a free copy of key takeaways from today's session. It will also include all the information in terms of the special offers that these three organizations are putting together.
Yes, sure.
Go from somebody. So I'm going to take care of that real quick.
I didn't know we were talking about.
All right. With that, a quick introduction for all the panelists today. We first have Nikhil from Chronicle, which is the platform that's automating ERE monitoring case tracking for disability firms. Chronicle monitors over 100,000 cases and 3.7 million SSA documents. And then from Luke from Superinsight, he's a military veteran who has built AI-driven medical record analysis for disability and injury-focused law firms. And lastly, we have Kristen from Workscape Analytics, who has a deep focus on the vocational data and hearing strategy for SSD cases. With that, I lead events and community and partnerships Chronicle. I'll be monitoring today and feeding your chat questions into the speakers. And overall, one of the things that you'll come across in this challenge of the workflow is there's often the situation in which the ERE-to-VE workflow breaks down. And the reason for that is simple, because the ERE releases they often will bury critical documents where firms are checking things manually, whether that's by the mail or they're using older platforms that check at fixed intervals, which leads to missed records entirely. There's late exhibits that end up meaning that it's, there's rushed last minute hearing prep that attorneys dread, which then leads to medical records that don't become an RFC without there being hours of manual work. So attorneys are often spending 2 to 4 hours pulling functional limitations by hand before they can even start building a theory of the case. And then from there, VE testimony catches firms off guard, which means that without any occupational data in hand, cross-examination of the VE expert is, very reactive, not strategic. And so the VE knows the numbers and you often don't. And then This leads to three silos as well, in which when you don't have a core workflow, you really don't really have, these things talking to one another. And as a result, things are disjointed, and it's just a big gap that these three platforms can close. So I'm going to pass it over to Nikhil, who's going to share more about things from the ERE side, and then go from there.
Awesome. Well, excited to be talking with you all today. As Will kind of mentioned, right, with hearing prep, one of the core issues is the flow of information. Traditionally, what a lot of firms have done is they've waited till just they usually do a fixed interval review cycle where maybe 60 days out before hearing, they'll review the case, and then maybe they'll wait until 5 days out. The issue is a lot of things can happen that time period, right? Anything from new medical records coming in, things being exhibited at the last minute, the earnings report getting filed, a medical expert getting added or the VE resume coming in. And it's just hard to know what's going on. And so if you're on this fixed interval review cycle, you're missing details, you're scrambling at the last minute, and there's no way you're being alerted of what's happening at the SSA because they don't have a built-in system for alerting you what's in the ERE. So it's a big pain point for a lot of folks where if you're running anywhere from one case to hundreds of cases, you just don't know and you're scrambling and being reactive rather than proactive on your hearing prep. I'll hand that off to Luke then.
Yeah. So, I don't have to preach to the choir how important RFCs are in the process of helping your clients get to the point where they are deemed unable to work for SSA's purposes. But the reality is, like, I have a lot of experience in the background of the VA side of disability, and so having gone through and spent a lot of time looking at warehouses full of files, tens of thousands of files with hundreds of thousands of pages, the struggle's real. You have to get to the information that matters, and oftentimes it's found on one page within that large corpus of information. So really, trying to help you guys get to the point where you are able to move quicker and faster and more efficiently to the information that helps make a difference for not only pre-hearing prep, but for the hearing itself, obviously. With citations, that is, what we're all about, and that's what we're trying to solve here.
Hi, everyone. When it comes to preparing for VE testimony, that can be very difficult to do because you don't know how the VE is going to testify or based on what data sources they're going to do that testimony until you're in the hearing. So under SSR 24.3p, you guys know that changed everything. Two main things that it did, it shifted the burden to attorneys to now raise questions and issues to challenge the VE testimony live in the hearing. That's no longer the judge's job, but it's yours to do. Another thing it did was allow VEs to use other data sources besides the DOT, namely the Occupational Requirements Survey, commonly referred to as ORS. It also shifted the burden to the VE to explain their methodology. So because SSR 24.3p changed the way that the hearing process happens in the hearing, it makes sense that it would affect the prep you guys need going into the hearing. So what we're going to show today is the fact that you don't have to go into a hearing blind. You don't have to be reactive to what the VE is going to say, that there are ways to anticipate job numbers and to go into the hearing with your own evidence to press VEs, specifically in that cross-examination time, about how they're coming up with the numbers and how they can reconcile the differences between the numbers you have based on the medical record and the numbers that they're testifying to.
Awesome. And that's the perfect segue for us to tee us up for the demos, which is ultimately, it doesn't have to be that way. With these three platforms, we have one connected workflow where every single document is getting analyzed before you walk in. To kick us off, Nikhil, if you want to take over on the screen share, we can cover the ERE monitoring side as the first step.
Yep, awesome. Setting the request to share. And then let me share my screen. Alrighty. You guys are able to see it now? Cool. So, as I was kind of mentioning, right, core problem for folks, especially the ERE at hearing levels, but at all levels, is you just don't know what's going on. It could be the mail that comes in, that's how you know an acknowledgement, hearing acknowledgement form was sent in, or, when a record gets exhibited, you kind of have to just wait until you check the ERE to know something was exhibited. So, either you have paralegals working on these cases and having to do some sort of rigorous check, or you yourself are doing it, and it's just a lot of wasted time and scrambling. What Chronicle does for you is we monitor the ERE on your behalf. So Chronicle gets your ERE credentials, and we actually check every e-file for every client every single day. So if you have 20 clients, we're opening all 20 files every single day. If you have 8,000 clients, 200 clients, we will open all of those files every single day to see what is new and be able to notify you through our dashboard and our notification system. You can see here, this is the Chronicle dashboard. Some of you may be familiar with it. You can see everything from your hearings to your decisions. But most importantly, down here we have the recent document section. This is like your virtual mailbox. Whenever something changes in the e-file, you'll be able to see it down here and see, was there a new medical record entered? Was there a notice of hearing? Right here, 507 on Paul King. It just helps you stay on top of what new documents are coming into the ERE. So that way you are able to detect those as soon as they hit rather than when you do your scheduled checks. If I actually click into one of these clients, Arthur Miller here, who is at the hearing stage, I can actually go and see the full list of documents from the ERE, and this will always be up to date from the last 24 hours. So there's no, spending a couple minutes to get the passcode, find the client's SSN, log into the ERE, or if you're using other platforms, clicking refresh and waiting, sometimes several minutes to hours to get new data. It's always available at your fingertips because we update every single day. You can see here we have everything from the exhibit numbers to actual files, and you can click into these and view the documents right out of Chronicle. You don't have to download to your computer. They're all OCR'd and searchable and all available to you. What makes Chronicle also really great is we try to flag to you what's new in those files. Sorry, it's taking a second to load. So there's two ways of doing this. One, you can just look at this list and we'll actually put a little dot on what is new since the last time you viewed this page. So for example, this fee agreement just came in, or most commonly at the hearing level, right? You'll see, oh, you know what? The earnings reports finally came in and they'll be flagged as little blue dots. So you know what's new in Chronicle from the last time you checked. If you even want to just filter this down, you can go to unread, and that will actually show you which of these documents have come in from the last time you checked Chronicle. So that we always know what's new, what you need to review. And as I mentioned, right, that could be earnings reports, it could be medical records, right? Maybe a hit mark came in the last minute, and you actually want to be able to review that. Chronicle's always checking it, you're always getting up-to-date information. Additionally, we have a great notification system. So if you don't want to have to open each page in Chronicle every day, you or your staff can claim cases and turn on notifications for new documents. And that will actually notify you and your team whenever a new document is added to the ERE or exhibited. That way, as soon as that hits, you will get notified that that thing was exhibited and you should go review it or update your records. We also have the ability to download the exhibit packet. So if you're familiar with the full ERE that you may have had before, we have that same packet. This is actually what we will then send out to Superinsight and down the line, so that way they can operate off these things. But once again, the great thing here is Chronicle is always up to date, and so whatever you are sending out to Superinsight or other providers will always have the latest set of medical records, exhibits, and so on. One last thing I'd also like to flag that's super useful for firms, especially if you're running, quite a few hearings, it's often hard to stay on top of your schedule and know what's hearings are on your docket. We have a great calendar view where you can actually go and view all of your hearings in one place. That way you can have all your hearings on a calendar and you can subscribe to this and add it to your Outlook or Google Calendar. So that way it's always automatically updated on your personal calendars and you never miss a beat, you never miss a hearing, given that sometimes the SSA is changing hearing dates, changing ALJs, etc. So this is kind of the core of Chronicle, right? It's all about staying on top of the ERE, what's changing, getting notified of those changes. We have a lot of other features, especially at the lower levels. The same idea applies where we're keeping you up to date on what else is coming through the mail. But at the hearing level, we're really able to help you stay on top of what's being exhibited, what new meta records or other documents are getting added. So that way, when I transition this over to Luke, they will always have the latest packet and you don't have to get, caught scrambling when new records get added. So with that, I'll hand it over to Luke to show a little bit about, now that we have the ERE file, what can we actually do with it?
Yeah, let me take over here. All right, everybody can see it okay? So once you're in Superinsight, after you have gone through that process within Chronicle, you've seen that you have up-to-date records or you have access to the file. There used to be a slower process. We all love clean workflows. So you used to have to just create the case and then you'd upload, drag, drop the files from your computer. But with the integration with Chronicle, we just simply come over here and we can make sure we input our API key from Chronicle that's in our settings within Chronicle, and then you can connect. And so with that, it's able to give us that nice clean workflow that saves us a little bit of time, and over time that can be a lot of time. So with many cases. And we're going to go ahead and import that case into that organization that we established. You can see now that that case has automatically been created and we click into it and we already have those files on standby. So those files are, even though at this point everyone's OCRing everything, we OCR it again. But so you can never be too safe. So once we get that, we can go ahead and select the files. We usually just tell everybody use the exhibited file. We can go ahead and come into the reports tab of the case. We know we're in that case. We know which tab we're in now at the top, and we can choose the files that we want to run the report on. And then we have a few options. So I always tell everybody, a lot of people like to run pre-hearing kind of prep later on in the process and kind of more obviously closer to your hearing date. But I always encourage people to start as early as possible. You can actually rebuild report on Superinsight with additional evidence up to 3 additional times after it's been run initially. So whether you run a 5-step review with chronology or you go with the summary report, they both offer a little bit different. This one's much more granular with obviously it's like 2 reports in one. I can show you an example as well. And now we have obviously the new Workscape Analytics report that allows us to extract those RFCs and go ahead and package them via API, and we send just the RFCs to Kristen over at her shop, and they go ahead and run all of that through their database, and they're able to return to us a nice packaged PDF that you guys can work with. So that's how you kick off a report with Workscape Analytics. It's going to be under the advanced mode, just so we all got that. They're the advanced template under the Social Security disability. And then we'll go ahead and take a look. This is what it looks like when it returns. We get this report back from Arthur Miller. For Arthur Miller, it pulls the information relevant to what's going on in the ERE in the case or within the file itself. And we're able to get those RFCs lined up with the citations. So, we can click on them and we can actually see what's going on. We can verify that the information that we're getting back matches with the information within that. So we can see here, occasionally 20 pounds, frequently 10 pounds. We're getting back that same information within the report itself. And that obviously translates into the most important part of the expedition that we're on here, which is to understand what they can do and what they can't do. Kristen, I will go ahead and parlay it over to you to kind of discuss, obviously, that
Thank you.
important factor.
Okay, so looking at this Workscape Analytics report that you can access through Superinsight, like Luke was saying, Superinsight is extracting this RFC based on the medical record. It's also pulling out all of the citations that show your evidence. This is where this is coming from. This is why this is part of the limitations for this individual. And then what we do at Workscape is we are applying the ORS calculations to this RFC. So I know this might be a jump scare for you guys looking at the numbers saying, oh, wow, this is one, the most populous job has 1.4 million. How is this useful to me? So I'm going to pop over to Workscape and show you that when you're using this Chronicle Superinsight Workscape flow, you can pull in the RFC for a client. This is the same Arthur Miller. When you click calculate, it's going to show you the job number estimates here in the national column. Now, again, this is not a favorable look. This is not a good, if I'm an attorney, I'm getting this back. That's not good news, right? However, all information is powerful when it comes to your case prep. So what this is showing you is you do not have enough medical evidence supporting a great RFC under ORS information. I don't think I need to explain the value of ORS. I know that it is the hot topic right now with SSR 24.3p. Everyone's talking about it, everyone's teaching on it because it is a game changer for your case strategy. Up until SSR 24-3p, the only thing you were worried about was the DOT. And I'm confident that you guys have mastered your strategies with DOT testimony from VEs. But with the introduction of ORS, with the new SSR, we've got to add another tool to the belt, and that's what ORS information is. It's another tool. Is it going to be the most beneficial tool in every case across the board? Maybe, maybe not, but it is a tool nonetheless, particularly important if the VE is using ORS to testify. It's also important if the VE is not using it to testify because then it opens up a whole other Pandora's box for cross-examination questions. Why aren't they using this data? But to just illustrate how building up that medical evidence is going to be useful, the original RFC was very limited. There were only a handful of selections. If I pop over to the next profile, let's add in SVP here. Let's add in some additional ORS factors like no bending, no crawling, no crouching. Maybe we can only do fine manipulation frequently, gross manipulation occasionally. Can't kneel. We have our sit stand choice allowed. Click calculate now and let's see what happens to the numbers. A significant reduction in job numbers based on adding those additional factors. Now, if you go back again to profile 2, I'll show you what happens when you add even a handful of the cognitive and mental requirements. So this section of ORS is massive because never before were cognitive and mental requirements being taken into consideration at the hearing level. There was no way to quantify that information. ORS changes that and addresses these factors. So if on this run of Arthur Miller, I get evidence from his psychiatrist to support that, hey, he really should not be interacting with the public, that also is going to couple with crowds, which is a concentrated form of the public. Just adding those 2 additional factors from the cognitive and mental section, you can see what it does to the job number estimates. So this illustrates how knowing your medical record, having it be organized and comprehensive, and having that RFC extracted for you, it gives you a launch point in the hearing. So you're not walking in empty-handed. You know, if you run this report early, like Luke suggested, you know in advance, oh wow, I really need to send my person back to the doctor. I need to gather more evidence because these numbers are so high. It can also inform your cross-examination questions. So you can know what are the most important and impactful factors to drill down on in your cross. And just a quick example of that, we have very, very granular information about these ORS numbers. And in a separate demo with Workscape, we can tell you and help you strategize how to use all of this information to your advantage at all stages of the hearing, during your prep, live during testimony, and then also on the back end, should it not work in your favor and you need to set it up for an appeals, we can help you with that as well.
Awesome. And with that, we're going to do a quick recap in terms of what we just saw in terms of this workflow. Nikhil will kick us off by sharing more again from the ERE monitoring case intelligence side, since I know a few folks joined a little after his presentation. So Nikhil, why don't you recap what you shared with folks?
Yeah, for sure. So at its core, right, Chronicle is all about the ERE. We automate ERE monitoring so you always know exactly what's changing in the file at all levels. Whether it's the initial recon level and you're doing that kind of standard case management to get it to hearing, or at the hearing so you don't miss any critical information in the file. Whether it is exhibited files, new medical records, earnings reports, resumes of VEs or medical experts, any forms you need to fill out. We make you proactive rather than reactive because we're able to tell you the day it gets added to the ERE that it's there. You're no longer waiting for your case manager to check it, or when you get time, we keep you up to date, whether it's through our notifications or our dashboard. We also make it really easy to see what the exhibits are. You can view it out of Chronicle. You always have your dashboard with your hearing calendar, everything at a glance, so you can have an inbox of what's changing, and you can always kind of keep track of those changes. And then most crucially, when you send things over to Superinsight or Workscape Analytics, you know that file is up to date and you're not going to have to redo work because we have the up-to-date file ready for you at any moment in time.
And with that information that comes from Chronicle, it leads us to Luke recapping what happens from that point to the RFC analysis and AI-powered chronologies.
Yeah, so being able to efficiently pull that information from Chronicle into the workflow of now breaking down the file thousands and thousands of pages, within a couple hours, you're able to effectively understand what's going on with the case, what you're lacking, where the red flags are, what a chronology, an organized chronology of information should look like within that process as well, and then leads to the final product of being able to take and extract RFCs, which ultimately we can send over to Workscape Analytics to be able to distill into an actual report that gives us the job numbers that we can work with.
Yep. So as Luke mentioned with his RFCs, that leads us to Workscape, sharing more about the occupational data and the VE cross-examination side of things.
Yeah, you should not go into a hearing empty-handed, especially since it is now with the burden is with you to challenge the VE's testimony and challenge those faulty job number estimates. How are you supposed to do that if you don't have your own evidence in hand? So with Workscape, you're able to use the software again in the entire process, pre-hearing, live during the hearing, and post-hearing. I know there's several companies offering a lot of things on the back end post-hearing, which is great, but wouldn't you rather handle business live in the hearing to hopefully avoid having to circle back around and get a favorable decision? You can do it live in the hearing with those instant job number calculations. And again, using ORS, these numbers can and should be tailored very specifically to your client and their limitations. If you have that robust medical evidence, you know exactly how to argue it into the case in your own hypotheticals, and also develop an effective cross strategy.
Awesome. And so with these three platforms, everything kicks off from Chronicle being the glue of when the ERE drops. There's some sort of new document that gets released, your team gets alerted, and then from there, that can be pushed off into the Superinsight side where the records can be analyzed. That's when everything is going to be broken down into matching the SSA listings, extracting the RFC findings, which then with this new integration from Workscape Analytics, there's the VE prep that can then be built so that the attorney can enter the RFC into Workscape. So with that example that Nikhil shared earlier, there's that Arthur Miller case that then shows up in Superinsight, and then Superinsight, you're able to run that Workscape Analytics report, and you see how these three platforms all kind of connect together. With that, we have a special offer for today's attendees. Pretty much for each respective company from Chronicle, 14 free case monitors. If you've never tracked your ERE monitoring with Chronicle, you can check it out by using the link in the chat. From Superinsight, there's private beta access that's been folks have been giving thumbs up to in the chat. So if you want to be part of that group, be sure to thumbs that message up. And then you also get $125 off your first month. And then from Workscape, one free vocational case consultation and 50% off the first monthly subscription. So just mention the code ERE-to-VE on any of the calls with three companies that have been mentioned here today. And then the other side of things, if you are looking to get the summary document of just how these three platforms talk to one another, submit your feedback in the chat for a free copy of those. But we're going to move on to Q&A so that we can cover some of those. Somebody has drawn on the screen here, so I don't know how to clear that actually. So I'm going to see if I can stop the screen share and reshare. All right. So the first question that I have is on the records and ERE side of things. Curious to hear from Nikhil on what's the most common ERE management mistake from firms that haven't automated ERE monitoring so far that he sees.
Yeah, for sure. So the most common mistake, honestly, is just being left scrambling, where you're not checking the ERE enough and you miss some important piece of information. As you know, sometimes judges exhibit things at the last minute. Say you get a medical record and you upload to the ERE and they take, they process it, but they don't exhibit it, and then eventually is exhibited. You now have to go rebuild your file and include that information with those exhibit numbers. So it's just a scramble of if you aren't checking the ERE enough, you miss these things, and then you're caught the day beforehand trying to update everything at that last minute. Or the other side being you miss some form. So say, they agree to do the tele hearing where they do it over the phone. You have to, have your client submit that form back saying they agree to it. Once again, if you miss those deadlines, you're just caught scrambling. So when you're, practice dealing with many cases, or you're solo and you just don't have the time, not having that flow of information and checking the ERE can be really just cause a lot of churn.
Next question from an RFC synthesis standpoint. Curious what's the difference between a summary and a synthesized RFC, and why does that matter at hearing level?
Oh, that's a good question. So summary, you could imagine it more like a high level passover of the information, almost like what you typically see today when you think of AI summary of records. John Doe went to Dr. Jones, presented with right hip issue, pain level 5 out of 10. Dr. Jones gave him Tylenol, sent him home, and they're going to follow up later. So that's kind of more of your summary versus a detailed breakdown, which is more of like the 5-step chronology, is a detailed breakdown, more in a SOAP format. You're extracting more of the actual details of the appointment. And furthermore, the RFC side of it, you're talking about getting straight to can they lift, bend, stoop, crawl, stand, finger, all the different aspects of what we need to function in our daily activities, especially in a work environment. So, which then translates objectively to actual job numbers. So that's the big difference.
And with that, curious under SSR 24.3p, what's the most common gap that Kristen, you may see in terms of how attorneys are using vocational data?
Yeah, so under SSR 24.3p, attorneys are not using ORS data enough. I know that there's been lots of trainings about it, lots of different opinions about the SSR in general. I know some of you are still in the camp with like balled up fist about it, like super upset about how it's impacted you in your work. However, with SSR 24.3p, it actually is beneficial because of the implementation of ORS data. You have access to kind of control the narrative a little more because it's now based on the medical record explicitly. ORS covers more than 350 data points. And so if you can map those to the medical record using something like the extraction of the RFC from Superinsight, then you're going in with essentially bulletproof evidence of how and why all of these different limitations need to be included in the VE's consideration of the job numbers.
Allison asked, does Workscape flag a EM 24027 rev violation during a hearing if the VE cites to a job on that list, for example, document preparer?
So those would be the DOT codes that were labeled as obsolete by Social Security and shouldn't be cited in testimony. ORS data is based on the SOC groups, not the DOT codes. And that's a huge shift, a huge kind of rewiring of how things work under DOT testimony versus ORS testimony is that ORS does not deal with DOT codes. So the short answer is no because of that. ORS is mapped to SOC groups.
Karen asked, how does Workscape Analytics compare to or differ from Skilltran? Most VEs will testify that they use Skilltran.
Many ways. We differ in many ways. The most glaring one is that Skilltran is using DOT numbers. They are producing job number estimates down to the DOT code, which is interesting considering that BLS never published a way to do that, to assign job number estimates to DOT codes. I know that that's what's been happening for decades and decades, but that's actually, I don't know how those numbers are being produced. And we at Workscape Analytics are using ORS data, which our classification data is as new as 2025. I say ours, it's ORS's, we're using ORS data. Whereas the DOT was last updated in 1991, many of which the classifications were updated in the 70s and 80s. So that's a huge difference. Another difference is methodology. At Workscape Analytics, we're producing job number estimates based on the methodology that BLS published on their website. It's called the basic approach, and we have it linked in Workscape for easy access. I'm happy to share that with you guys as well. There is no secret sauce. There's no special proprietary things that we're doing behind the scenes. So it's a defensible, clear, published methodology.
Leads to a follow-up question from Meredith, which is Workscape still has limits, correct? Off-task behavior, cane usage, it factors in full-time and part-time jobs due to its use of BLS data, plus the issue with additive percentage that the ORS cautions about. Has this software been peer-reviewed?
So peer-reviewed as in are people in the community using it? Absolutely. We have eyes on it, Workscape, from Social Security representatives. We have eyes on it from people in Congress as well, Ways and Means. There are scholars who are in contact with us. Articles are being written, not published yet. I'm going to be very happy on that day to share with you guys. However, it is being used in the industry. It is being accepted. Testimony is being given based off of the information published by Workscape because, again, it's essentially a fancy calculator, really. All we did was build an interface for people to access the ORS data. We are not applying any proprietary anything to the numbers. We're simply making the data accessible. I hope that answers your question. If not, I'm happy to follow it up.
Awesome. From the records and ERE side, Nikhil, curious, what does an attorney's case typically look like when they come to Chronicle without, Chronicle being in the workflow? What's typically missing from your observations?
Sorry, not quite following the question.
Like what's typically missing from an attorney's case when in their overall workflows as to why they're showing up at Chronicle? Or like, are there certain points
Oh,
that you notice more folks are turning to an ERE monitoring solution like Chronicle?
yes, for sure. So I will say it often starts at the lower levels, right? A lot of attorneys and representatives are mainly focused on the hearing side, which, there is a little bit slower flow of documents. It's a little bit faster. So you maybe feel like you're scrambling a little less, but obviously if you're a volume practice, that can easily build up quickly. Where most firms actually get the most value of Chronicle immediately is at those lower levels of initial and recon, where they have maybe a team of case managers that they're realizing, oh, we're bringing on more cases. We need to actually start hiring people, but the economics don't quite work out. A big part of that is it just takes a lot of legwork to keep track of those cases, open the mail, and so on. So where Chronicle really slots in is monitoring those lower level cases, so that you can actually develop them as those files appear in the ERE. You can proactively call your client about forms coming in, review medical evidence as the SSA grabs it so you can know if it's worth appealing. And so that's a very common breakdown in process and problem firms are experiencing as they grow, that they need that help at the lower level so they don't have to keep on hiring. But then it very quickly translates. So if you have a lot of lower level cases, now you have a lot of cases at hearing and appeals, and Chronicle once again helps you gain that efficiency there. So that way you're able to stay on top of those files and connect a suite of AI tools. Another key reason why people come to Chronicle and have it break down their flow beforehand is they are using other tool like case management systems that don't have open APIs and can't easily connect. Just to name a few, I know like some folks use Prevail, it's quite common. Prevail does not have an open API so that you can connect your data to Superinsight or to Workscape Analytics. So you're missing out on a lot of these newer technologies and tools that allow you to cut down on prep time. Chronicle works in tandem where all of your data is available in Chronicle in addition to already having been put into Prevail. So that way you can connect these other tools and gain these edges with technology that you couldn't before. And I know moving case management systems is very difficult. I obviously don't advocate you take that in like a weekend as a project. It takes, months of planning. So having Chronicle as that additional layer of API connection to other tools is another reason why people who come to Chronicle, get a lot of value, and have that, fix their workflows.
Sense. And then from the RFC synthesis side, maybe Luke or Kristen can answer this one. How does this source citation layer change what an attorney can do with the RFC at the VE table?
I mean, I'll just simply say I don't have to preach to the choir. I've never been in a hearing, but I hear enough from the advocates that the judge only cares about where's it at in the file. So if you can't cite to it, then you're going to have a hard time arguing your position or the position of your client. So I would say that's pretty critical.
Yeah, to just add on, we really encourage attorneys to take advantage of their opportunity to propose their own hypotheticals in the hearing. And so if you have those citations in the medical record to these factors that you want included in the VE's testimony and their job number calculations, having the citation is very powerful because you have the support that you need to advocate for its inclusion in the calculation.
And for Kristen, I believe this is a question from Alan for whether or not there's a sample report that can be viewed.
We actually have many reports in Workscape. Some are geared towards attorneys, some are geared toward vocational professionals. I'm happy to send you a sample of any one you'd like. Just send me an email.
Awesome. And this is across the workflow question. So for all three speakers today, if a firm only uses one or two of these tools, like where's the prep going to break down?
Yeah, I guess I'll get started, which is if you're not using Chronicle, where this kind of breaks down is just you still have to manually get the files, upload them to Superinsight, and just stay on top of what's changing. And so you really kind of lose out on having your files constantly updated. As Luke mentioned, right, you guys get a couple free refreshes through Superinsight. And so if you want to be able to kind of constantly monitor the case, know what's changing about it, you're going to miss out on that because you're going to just have that one download you did 60 days out, uploaded, and not come back to it until 5 days later. So it's just, you're losing time there that you could have been proactively changing your strategy based on new information.
Yeah, well said.
From the Workscape perspective, Our platform begins with the RFC checklist. If you do not have a clear RFC that you're working with, you're kind of halted before you can even get going. And so having Superinsight extract that RFC on your behalf, and it gives you that starting point to then develop a strategy based on the job numbers.
That led to a question from Lori, which is, can the speakers just share in general the fee structures associated with each of these products? And also then speak to whether or not there's any price breaks for using all three products.
Yeah, so Chronicle starts at $9 per case for the lifetime of the case. To have these integrations, you do need to be on our Pro plan, which is $14 per case for the lifetime of the case. That's a one-time fee. If the case gets remanded 3 times, it's still just that one fee.
Yeah, I think Michelle just shared the superinsight.ai pricing page on there, but you can see it. So on the high end, if you're a user that wants to just use Superinsight occasionally with these reports, it can cost as little as $80 for an RFC, or as high as $80 for one of these RFC reports, or $160 for one of these 5-step reviews with chronologies. But if you have more higher volume, that price significantly drops, can even cut drastically in half and be a fraction of that, depending on the volume you have as you have more need. So, but it gives you the option and the flexibility to go up and down to different tiers in the pricing schedule on our page. You can see that, which allows you as the advocate, as you have more hearings coming up or less hearings coming up, you're not on the hook for significant cost based on whether you have or don't have something that you need to run a report on. So we have both annual and monthly options, as well as the on-demand schedule as well.
For Workscape, we are subscription based. So we offer a basic plan, which covers the top 100 SOC codes. And those are the results that will return to you based on calculations. And then we have our premium subscription, which is going to return results on all 460 SOC codes. The premium platform also has the advanced reporting that I mentioned. So most of our attorney clients do prefer the premium subscription, which starts at $178 per month. You get significant discounts if you subscribe annually. We also have special discount codes for those of you who are NOSCR members. And it is not a per price or per run fee. It's subscription based, so you can do as many calculations, handle as many cases as you'd like throughout that month.
Awesome. If folks have any final questions in the chat, feel free to drop them in. Lori had another question, which is, what are the advantages to using Superinsight for medical summaries compared to if it's done? I'm assuming, Lori, the question is through Dodo Detect's medical chronologies in Chronicle.
Well, I will just start by saying you'll soon have the option for in the near future, an option on Chronicle for a Superinsight summary. Well, I can't really speak to the other summaries. I can only speak to ours, so I will do that. We have quality summaries of the information that allows you to have also curated section of the report that has imaging results, curated section that has severe conditions listed from a summary perspective. That is a separate report, obviously, than our gold standard report, which is the 5-step review with chronology. And that's like basically 2 reports in one, that you get to have the 5-step walkthrough for pre-hearing prep. And you also get a chronology to go with that as well.
Go, anything you want to add on that side?
No, well, I was going to say definitely check Superinsight out. I think trying is the best way to know the differences. And so I would just, suggest always giving everyone a shot. Everyone has different opinions, different reasons to like different meta chronologies, and I do think they have a really good product.
Yeah, good good feedback. Yeah, and the first case is on us, guys. So if you haven't used Superinsight or it's been a couple years, come on down. We'll spot you one.
With that, I think we have tackled all of the questions in the chat today. So thank you so much, everybody, for those that added in a question. We're going to start closing this out. So if you haven't already checked out the chat, I'm going to post it one last time. If you're looking for the freebie, which is just the takeaways from what all three of these platforms do together in this workflow, just submit the feedback and then you'll get a link at the end with the takeaways from today's session. And then from there as well, if you want to take advantage of any of the offers today, the key code is going to be ERE-to-VE to mention to any of these three teams. Other than that, thank you so much to Luke, Kristen, and Nikhil for sharing this workflow. Hopefully folks find a lot of value out of it. And we'll catch you guys next time for the next version of Advancing Technology and Disability Law. I believe we have another workshop in a few weeks for how to build your referral program up in your practice. So hope to see you there in the start of June. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.